Coming up next on the Backroads of Montana, near the eastern border, we'll tour an historic fur trading post, then watch some big birds soar over the state's smallest wilderness area. As we head west, we'll visit a Billings artist and view his unique work. Up on the slopes, we'll meet a very brave boy, and we'll move all over the compass with Montana's roadside historical markers. On this episode of Backroads, we've literally reached our limit.
Backroads of Montana is made possible with production support from the Greater Montana Foundation, Travel Montana, and the University of Montana, where the discovery continues.
Well, it's beautiful with spacious skies, has amber waves of green, and has purple mountains majestic that rise up out of the plains. And all across America, from sea to shining sea, where the mountains and the prairies meet, is a place I need to be. Home is where Montana is my home. From mountain peaks to prairie lands, the places I have known. And I'm bound to ramble, yes, I'm bound to roam. And when I'm in off the road now, boys, Montana is my home.
Hello, I'm William Marcus. Welcome to the Backroads of Montana. Today, we're at Montana's very first dude ranch, the historic OTO. It's located between the Absaroka and Beartooth Mountains, about 15 miles north of Yellowstone National Park. Throughout today's program, we'll experience much of the OTO's rustic charm. In 1912, when the OTO began operation, the Old West was still alive. Here, real cowboys and wranglers mixed with European royalty and American celebrities. Together, they hunted, fished, packed into the high country on horseback, and generally recaptured the nostalgia that was once the Old West. Nobody loved the West and Montana more than the subject of our first story. He's known as the father of the roadside historical marker. But the story behind Bob FLETCHER is as remarkable as the history found on his signs. Before 1930, touring Montana's scenic byways was an uncertain affair. Roads were narrow, unpaved, and randomly marked, among the nation's worst. But Depression-era relief programs brought needed highway construction, an emerging tourist industry, and a talented engineer to the surface. His name was Bob FLETCHER. An Iowan by birth, FLETCHER arrived in Montana in 1908 and tramped his way from Alzada to the Yak on a survey crew. Fascinated with the romanticized myth of the Old West, FLETCHER collected stories from the old-timers he met while surveying and studied their regional speech.
He knew miners, he knew loggers, he knew cowboys, he knew native people. In contemporary parlance, you could say he was a people person.
His friendly personality and sharp writing style landed him a job with the Montana Highway Department, in charge of tourism and promotion. Immediately, FLETCHER got to work designing roadside parks, museums, and port of entry stations which attracted tourist dollars with classic Western hospitality.
You're coming into the state, say at Weebo, and the first thing you're going to see on the Montana border is a little log cabin that's manned by 2 or 3 college students. And he would dress them up in rolled up Levi's and cowboy boots and Western shirts and bandanas around their neck. And they were the welcoming committee for people coming into the state.
But FLETCHER's most enduring addition to the Montana landscape would be a series of roadside historical markers. They were the first of their kind in America.
The text should not be a lot of stilted copy with dates and all. I wanted them to be like a native was standing there telling you about the place. Bob FLETCHER.
He told Montana history using the rural language he had heard years earlier, but folksy words like plum and larup made department officials skeptical. In the summer of 1935, they reluctantly agreed to a test. FLETCHER was ready, with plans for 25 markers.
People loved him. People in Montana really love them. The people who come from out of state love them. And they were reported in the national media quite favorably.
By now, FLETCHER's project had a green light and a yearly budget of $5,000. He alone chose the marker's location and historical content. Irvin Shorty Shope, the department's graphic artist, designed signs with a rugged Western appearance. He illustrated most with an ornate first letter and silhouettes carved along the crossbeams. Ace Kendrick, head of the sign shop, hand-lettered the text onto large sheets of plywood, easily read from inside the car. The work of all three men was firmly anchored in a foundation made from Montana fieldstone.
I've always wondered if those three guys who were involved in that project even had a clue on what an impact they would have.
Fletcher insisted on wide turnouts so motorists could read his signs without becoming a traffic hazard. For many, his informative yet humorous markers became a first lesson in Montana history. He taught us how we got here, where we settled, and who preceded us. He reminded us of our successes and our tragedies, our heroes and our scoundrels, and everyone had their favorite.
He called Butte an unashamed, rootin', tootin', hell-roaring camp in days gone by, and still drinks her liquor straight.
When they went to town in the frontier days seeking surcease from vocational cares and solace in the cup that cheers, it was just as well for the urbanites to either brace themselves or to take cover. The citizens of any town willing and able to be host city for a combination of the above diamonds in the rough had to be quick on the draw and used to inhaling powder smoke.
When a top rider from this part of the country is forking the hurricane deck of a sun-fishing fuzztail, some of his pals are prone to sit on the top rail of the corral, emitting advice and hollering, "Powder River, let her buck," by way of encouragement.
Over the next 7 years, Fletcher and Shope produced more than 100 historical markers and collaborated on an impressive body of promotional material, including travel brochures, highway maps, and posters, most of it distributed at the port of entry stations. In his free time, Fletcher wrote his own brand of cowboy poetry. One of his poems caught the attention of songwriter Cole Porter. In 1934, Porter bought the poem for $250 for use in a musical called Adios Argentina. The two men agreed to share authorship. Adios Argentina was never made, but the song, which carried only Porter's name, dominated the hit parade.
Cole Porter rewrote the song, and Roy Rogers sang it.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in.
The long and the short of it was that the real classic lines in Don't Fence Me In that I think all of us who live here can relate to were not Porter's, but they were written by Bob Fletcher.
There's too much silver in my hair for me to be concerned with vanity or pride of composition. Bob Fletcher.
In Montana, Fletcher's historical markers were evolving. To slow the effects of Montana's harsh weather, Ace Kendrick switched from plywood to fir, then redwood with deeply routed letters. Eventually, time caught up with some of Fletcher's more colorful language. In 1985, the Montana legislature allocated money to restore the older signs and remove any offensive text. Revisions were carefully made to retain the original flavor and spirit of the Fletcher stories. Montana's roads were changing too. When the interstate highways came through, roadside attractions like historical markers weren't allowed. Some found a new home at a highway rest area, while others were retired to a vacant lot. When the truck scales on Highway 212 came down, so did marker number 173. For years it sat in storage at Miles City. Now, thanks to some resourceful Broadus residents and students from Powder River County High School, roadside marker number 173 is back in place.
The next number is my original version of Don't Fence Me In. Don't fence me in, give me land.
It tells the story of Bob Fletcher and the poem that became a Western anthem, and how Cole Porter finally gave credit where it was due. And now, 65 years after he wrote his first marker, Bob Fletcher has his place in Montana history.
Don't fence me in.
The Montana Department of Transportation is very committed to the historical marker program. Today there are more than 170 signs, with many new ones that honor smaller communities and Montana's American Indian population. This is the original homestead cabin on the OTO. It was built in the 1880s. The OTO was a thriving dude ranch from 1912 to 1932. Dick and Dora Randall operated it. Dick was a Montana cowboy and experienced backcountry guide. Dora was famous for her hospitality and for her cooking. Dick bought the land and the original one-room cabin from two stagecoach robbers who were eager to settle on a price and leave the area. The entire transaction took only 10 minutes. Trading is the subject of our next Backroads piece, at a remote spot that's part of 2 states and 4 counties. From 1829 to 1867, the Upper Missouri River hide and fur trade was controlled from one place, Fort Union Trading Post at the confluence of the Missouri and Yellowstone rivers.
Well, it was more than just a trading post. It was the best built fort on the Upper Missouri. Fort Union was established in 1828 by Kenneth Mackenzie of the American Fur Company. And this fort was built to trade with the Assiniboine Indians. This was the Assiniboine Indian Territory. And each tribe wanted a fur trading post in their own territory. And so that's why this site was selected. All that was left here when the Park Service acquired this site in 1966 was the footprint, the foundation stones of the various buildings. Reconstruction began in 1985 with the flagpole, and then in 1987 the bourgeois house. The walls and the barracks were completed in 1989, and the Indian Trade House was completed in 1991.
It was a combined social and commercial negotiation. They'd have a meal, they'd have coffee, they would give speeches, but eventually they'd start talking about the terms of the trade.
And it was painted and built this way for a couple of reasons. One, with its massive structure and grandeur to impress the Plains Indians, and on the other hand, at the same time, to intimidate.
We call this the hunter's shack, okay? These little dwellings like this were scattered intermittently along the walls, tucked in between the support braces. They were used for storage. They might have been used as a habitation or a dwelling, as this one is. But every square inch inside the fort was used for something.
The next room is a huge storage room in which all the supplies and trade goods that were brought up on the steamboats.
In 1832, the first steamboat, the Yellowstone, arrived at the bank out front. And from 1832 until 1859, Fort Union was the head of steamboat navigation on the Missouri River. This is as far up as you would come. And so the trade goods would fan out from here, and all the furs gathered at those other forts would be funneled back here to Fort Union and then shipped en masse down to St. Louis. Well, Fort Union shipped to St. Louis about 50,000 buffalo robes annually, 25,000 beaver pelts, 30,000 deer skins, on and on and on. Almost every type of fur-bearing animal was brought in here to trade. And Prince Maximilian in 1833 says that they have everything from mouse to buffalo. We don't know about the mice, but we definitely know they had buffalo here.
So my wife and I came over here, and she pretty much just decked the whole place with our stuff. It's basically the interior of a teepee inside a box, you know, but it does show the union of the two cultures.
The history of Fort Union is the history of whites and Indians coming together in peacefully coexistence for economic benefits.
Fort Union hosts about 30,000 visitors each year. In June, 5,000 frontier men and women gather at the trading post for the annual Fur Trade Rendezvous. The site is open year-round and is free to the public. Guests of the OTO Ranch arrived by rail at Corwin Springs Station. They traveled the remaining 5 miles to the secluded ranch by stagecoach or wagon. Dick Randall often said that if you don't feel better after 1 month at My Montana Ranch, you don't need a doctor. You need an undertaker. Let's relax for a few minutes at Montana's smallest wilderness area. The Medicine Lake National Wildlife Refuge was formed by receding glaciers and is now home to a variety of birds and wildlife. Medicine Lake boasts one of the largest white pelican rookeries in the United States. During the spring and summer, thousands of pelicans with their 9-foot wingspan fly in and call the islands home. Thousands of other varieties of birds, such as ducks, geese, herons, and cranes, stop in Medicine Lake during spring and fall migration. A 14-mile self-guided auto tour will help guide you around the refuge and point out interesting highlights like American Indian teepee rings, sand dunes, prairie potholes, and coulees. The tour is open from May through September. A 100-foot observation tower near the refuge headquarters will afford a bird's-eye view of the entire 31,000-acre area. But bring along your insect repellent, because they grow mosquitoes extra large out on the prairie. A 1920s-era promotional pamphlet for the OTO Dude Ranch stated that, at an elevation of 5,000 feet, our days at the OTO are never hot and the nights are cool. There are practically no flies or mosquitoes and no poisonous reptiles. At the ranch, guests were likely to see bear, elk, and mountain lions, as well as this lion, which was sent to the OTO by a baron from Europe after his stay here. Our next story is about a man from Billings who turned his love of wildlife into a unique art form.
To be a successful artist, it's all in the eyes. Not these eyes, these eyes.
It's really quite odd. I can do the whole picture, have it painted, and until I finish the eyes, it will not look alive. But when I finish up the eyes, it does have a sparkle of life to it. And a little bit of me goes into every picture.
Jan Schoonover creates three-dimensional artwork on leather.
It's actually sculpturing on leather is what it is. And you can do things on leather that you can't do in metal.
Jan started sculpting leather in 1996. He had no formal art training. He says his knowledge of wildlife was more important than his knowledge of art.
Like a bear here, you need to know the outline of a bear, their muscle structure, and things of that sort to get it to look realistic.
The process is relatively simple, but very meticulous. Jan starts by tracing the animal's image onto a piece of leather. This picture shows the next stages as Jan cuts more detail into the leather. Next, he adds the third dimension. He dampens the leather and then uses a marble or a special tool to give the animal its shape. Jan fills in the back so the picture will retain its form. Then there's the hair. Jan cuts and lifts each individual hair on the animal. Strong hands and a multi-blade knife help the process.
I get hand cramps, especially when I'm doing the herring, but other than that, no. I find it relaxing, really.
Jan says only a handful of artists in the country sculpt leather.
They are quite unique, and they demand pretty high price because I can only do about 25 to 30 pictures a year. There's quite a bit of time involved in completing one of them.
Jan has sold artwork from coast to coast. A complicated piece costs about $5,000. It seems like a high price until you consider it takes Jan about 200 hours to complete a picture. Simpler pieces take less time, but each one has a different feel, whether it's a ferocious grizzly or a docile black bear.
And I try and get a certain look in every picture that I do.
It all comes back to the eyes. Jan doesn't use any glass eyes. He hand paints each animal's eyes.
No matter where you put one of my pictures, wherever the light comes from, it'll reflect just like your eye would or mine would. It'll be a natural highlight. Anybody that's ever bought a piece of my artwork has always come back and said, you know, when I hung that in my house, I get more comments on that than any other piece of art I have. And that really makes you feel good.
Jan is trying to increase the number of leather artists. He teaches a class in sculpting leather and creating three-dimensional art. At the OTO Ranch, Dick Randall taught his dudes the many details of cowboy life, like how to saddle a horse, throw a lariat, tie a bandana, or even crease your hat. By the early 1930s, the Depression signaled the end of dude ranches in Montana and Wyoming. Dick and Dora sold the OTO to a former guest, who turned it back into a stock ranch. Campfires in the mountains, pack trips into the hell-roaring country, and snowball fights on glaciers were no longer accessible from the OTO. In our final story, we'll meet a Missoula boy who's enjoying access to outdoor recreation for the first time, thanks to some very special volunteers.
With liberty and justice for all.
Another day begins at Russell Elementary School.
Good morning, Mrs. Taylor.
Except Devin isn't paying attention to his schoolwork. He's thinking about one thing.
Nice work, Devin.
I had no idea it was so much fun.
Devin Armstrong was born prematurely and has cerebral palsy. His skiing adventure starts at home. Devin's mother provides the help getting ready,
Do you feel good and funny?
while Devin supplies the jokes.
Knock, knock. Who's there? Potato. Potato who?
Mom packs up. Younger brothers pile on. And it's almost time to go. Devin's mother heard about an adaptive skiing program starting in Missoula.
Gosh, this would be a great opportunity for Devin to have an experience that his peers have. And Devin's cognitively really bright, and he knows that they're getting opportunity to have some fun and go skiing. And so I know he wants to have those opportunities that other kids have.
The program is called Eagle Mount. It provides therapeutic recreation for people with disabilities. It started in Bozeman and now offers programs in Great Falls, Billings, and Missoula. A short trip to Marshall Mountain, and Devin's ready to meet the volunteers specially assigned to him.
Good to see you. How are you? You ready to go up and make some turns today?
It's always fun.
It's always fun. What makes it so fun?
Because I have helpers.
Yeah, who are your helpers?
Howard and Paul and Jenna.
Yeah.
Eagle Mount volunteers will push Devin to places he's never been, but always wanted to go.
The first week we had him in a sit ski, and he wanted to stand. So the next week, his volunteers were bound and determined to get him standing up skiing. If they had to duct tape him in, he was going to be standing up, and it was great.
Remember what to do if something's pinching? Hit Jenna. Just give her a big elbow like that.
Devin knows it's a scary thought, trying something for the first time.
That I would show not to be afraid.
Oh. Do you think some kids might be afraid?
Yeah. If they never gone skiing before, they might be a little bit afraid. I watched the kids. Then when I got up there, I'm like, wow, I'm moving the air.
Wow, you're what?
Up in the air.
Oh, up in the air.
And I went on there and I was just amazed.
We got on the lift and he was so excited about that. He said, I hadn't expected this part, and said, are you scared? And he said, not anymore. So, you know, just hearing their reactions and seeing their faces is, how could you stay away from that? You know, it's just very rewarding.
It's beautiful out today.
An equipment safety check, volunteers in place, and Devin's ready for some snow flying fun.
I can only imagine that, you know, because his motion's limited, he's never been able to run or anything like that and feel the wind on his face. And so I sort of think about that while he's out there and sort of put myself in his shoes, and I can understand why he's having such a good time.
Looking good, Devin, looking good.
I think it would be putting it short to say, oh, it's just an outdoors experience, because it's so much more than that. Now when he's reading a book and it's talking about skiing and the wind and the cold and the snow, and he's going to totally understand that. even if he was only able to experience this one time.
Now when Devin moves from one class to the next, he shares similar experiences with his classmates, whether it's in school or out of school activities. Back to the ski hill for one last trip down the mountain. It's hard to tell who's having more fun.
There's something about volunteering as opposed to getting a paycheck that you don't look for the money at the end of the week, so you concentrate so much harder on what you're actually doing, and when you do that with a group of people, the bonds you make are just fantastic.
That's a soft spot for me. It's really neat to have people, especially as young and energetic as those guys are, to work with your child. And that's part of, I think, the battle you face when you have a special needs child is, it's easy for me to accept him, but to know that other people accept him and want to make his life richer and fuller, that's a real blessing to have people like that.
All right.
Devin's day of skiing comes to an end, but he leaves with the perfect skier's attitude.
But wait till next year, we have a whole nother year to go next year.
In addition to their skiing, Eagle Mount, Missoula hopes to offer horseback riding and rock climbing. Well, that's our show. We'd like to thank the Gallatin National Forest for all their cooperation. Under the guidance of a Forest Service preservation team, volunteers working in week-long shifts are helping restore the OTO's deteriorating log structures. If you'd like to volunteer, contact the Gallatin National Forest. If you have a story idea for Backroads, drop us a line at the Backroads of Montana, the University of Montana, Missoula, Montana, 59812. As long as you keep watching, we'll keep covering the Backroads of Montana. I'm William Marcus. See you next time.
To order a copy of this or other Backroad shows, or for more information, visit us online at www.montanapbs.org or call 1-800-227-5836.
Backroads of Montana is made possible with production support from the Greater Montana Foundation, Travel Montana, and the University of Montana, where the discovery continues.
And the folks out here have the time of day and a helping hand to share. Home is where Montana is my home. From mountain peaks to prairie lands, the places I have known. And I'm bound to ramble, yes, I'm bound to roam. And when I'm in off the road now, boys, Montana is my home. Coming in off the road now, boys, you know I'm heading home.